Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inside Israel. Sorry for the delay. I'm in a hotel room here in Houston, Texas, as you can see from the lovely artwork behind my corner, in the corner behind me. And welcome to Inside Israel. It is the week of March 31st, 2025. Today's going to be a little bit on the shorter side. I have a performance this afternoon for Barron Academy, which is an Orthodox Jewish day school here in Houston, hence the trip. And then I am back to Israel tomorrow. I also want to let there's been a lot of questions I've posed to you about should I keep the live broadcast, go only with audio podcasts on Wednesdays. For the time being, here's what I've decided, and it kind of affects this week as well. People really enjoy these live conversations. I'm actually really honored to hear many of you say that you rely on it for an intimate, honest source of information about what's really happening in Israel. And that is, I'm serious when I say I'm honored to hear that, because that's really the point of this, is to get behind the headlines and sort of show you what the average Israeli, if there is such a thing, is actually saying, doing, reacting, what we feel about what's happening in the country right now. I know you can get the headlines anywhere. So my job is to just give you the honest information, even if you don't always like hearing it. And believe me, there are many times when I get feedback from people that they don't like what I'm telling them. I don't take that personally. I think what you're actually saying is, I don't like that this is the situation, and you might be taking it on me a little bit, and that's okay. But my job, as I see it, is to give you that honest story. So we're going to keep these live conversations. At the same time, I think there's something to be said for recording the Wednesday podcasts, the ones that drop on various podcast platforms. There's something to be said for recording those on my own without a live audience, in private. It gives me a chance to make mistakes, which my engineer can take out. It gives me a chance to really put together an outline that I stay on top of as I'm moving forward, and not being swayed by the comments that are coming into the stream, etc. So for the time being, that's what we're going to do. Is these Sunday broadcasts are going to continue, but even though you are enjoying these, I encourage you to please subscribe to the audio podcast, which is different. Those go up every Wednesday morning, US time, on Apple and on Spotify. And if you want to get the links to those to subscribe, I put the web address in the chat here. Go to joelchasnoff.com/podcast, and you'll see the two buttons for Apple and Spotify. Just click the one that applies to you. Wherever you listen to other podcasts, that's probably where you should listen to mine. And that way you can subscribe to Inside Israel. It'll just go automatically to your phone. Those audio broadcasts are also on that page, joelchasnoff.com/podcast. So you can listen there. And again, that's different content than you're going to be hearing right now in this Sunday conversation and on future ones. This podcast is very much an experiment. I started it on a whim right after October 7th. We are now, sadly, a year and a half away from that. It's hard to believe that by the next time we will have met, next Sunday, we'll already be past, or maybe it is next Sunday or Monday, will be the year and a half anniversary of October 7th. I certainly didn't think that a year and a half out, we'd still be where we are, with the same prime minister in power, with 59 hostages still being held in Gaza. But alas, that is where we are. In any case, this is an element of an experiment, and I'm always tinkering with the right format. And from now, it's going to be these live conversations on Sunday, and then on Wednesday, different content in a podcast that I record on my own. So please join that if you haven't already. In terms of this week, what I want to talk about right now, on Wednesday, in the podcast that hopefully you'll listen to then, I'm going to talk about the cultural differences between being in the US and in Israel. I think this is my 70th trip back to the United States since moving to Israel in late summer of 2015. So 2015? 2016. Yeah, late summer 2016, my family and I relocated to there. And this is my 70th trip back. And every time I come back to the US, the differences between the two places become more and more stark. And I find myself having to actually adjust my behavior as I become ever bit more slightly Israeli. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the Wednesday episode. Today, what I want to talk about with you is really just where Israelis are at right now psychologically. And as someone who writes books and tells stories and performs comedy, I've always believed that sometimes a tiny story is a great way to tell the bigger story. Maybe even in the best way, that the tiniest stories say the most about who we are and where we are. And there's a really tiny story out of Israel this week that I think really exemplifies the psychology of the Israeli people in general. You all know the name Hirsch Goldberg Polin, Zichrono Livracha. Hirsch was one of those 6 hostages who was executed underground, and he's the son of Rachel and John Polin. John, I can't say I know him well, but he was at Camp Ramon, Wisconsin at the same time I was at Camp Ramon, Wisconsin, and the Polins, Rachel Polin Goldberg and John Polin, have really become, in a way, the spokespeople for the hostage movement. They've been very outspoken to the point where people have even suggested that Rachel would run for Knesset or some other office in Israel. I'm not so sure she should. I think if you want to make sure your voice gets squashed and you're never heard from again, go into politics in Israel, because if you really want to make an impact, probably politics is not the way to go. So I think there are maybe better ways for her to put her talents and her oratory skills to use. But in any case, you know who they are, and they've been very outspoken about the plight of the hostages. And they've never been political, but they're getting ever more so political as we move along, as they grow more frustrated with Netanyahu. Some of you have written to me astounded at how critical I am of Netanyahu, but I want you to understand it's not just that I personally can't stand him. I'm speaking for most of the country right now. Close to 80% of Israelis are now saying that they think he's operating out of personal motive and not for the good of the country. Close to 80% believe that he should resign and that someone else should be the prime minister. So it's not just me. We have lost total faith in Netanyahu. And I think saddest of all is that most Israelis, close to 80%, believe that the hostages are not coming home because Netanyahu does not want them home. That if he wanted them home, he could arrange for it. And I believe that as well. But that relates to the small story I want to tell you. And this is about John Polin, the father of Hirsch, Zichrono Livracha. John Polin said in the last 24 hours, he asked all members of the coalition in the government, this is Netanyahu and all of his right-wing parties that are forming the coalition in the Knesset, he asked them to please stop wearing the yellow hostage pin on their clothing. He says it just adds to the pain to see you wearing the yellow hostage pin. Okay, let's think about that for a minute. The father of a hostage who was killed in Gaza is asking the prime minister of the country to stop wearing the yellow hostage pin on his clothing. What does this mean? What does this say? Well, like I said, this exemplifies where Israelis are right now. We have lost all faith that Netanyahu and his coalition are going to try to bring the hostages home. Every day we hear headlines, new Israeli delegation heading to Qatar, new Israeli delegation going to Egypt, Israeli cabinet meets to discuss the hostage deal. It's all bullshit. Okay? That's what we believe. We believe it's a lot of sound and fury signifying nothing. We have no faith that Netanyahu is going to try to bring the hostages home. And think about what that means. John Polin asking the prime minister to please go ahead and take off your hostage pin. What he's basically saying is, you don't actually believe it, so stop showboating and stop pretending that you actually do want the hostages home, because you clearly do not. Now, this is not happening just in a vacuum. I want to give you a little other context as well. This week, if there was ever question of whether this government was going to fall, this week that question was answered, that it is most likely not going to. New Israeli elections are not scheduled until October of 2026. There's always been this hope that somehow the government would collapse before then. But really, the last hope was that there wouldn't be a budget. The law in Israel is if the Knesset cannot pass a budget, then automatically there are new elections, I think in 30 days or 60 days or what have you. And this week, the budget passed. And if you look at this budget, It is the most disgusting, the grossest budget in Israel's history. So, just to give you a little bit of very, you can obviously look online and read the details, but here's what Israelis are seeing. Israelis are seeing that social services are being cut. So, if you support the environment, the budget for the environment and environmental related protections has been cut. If you support women's rights and children's rights and the safety of women and children, including funding for shelters for battered women and children, those funds have been cut. Education has been cut. You can go down the list. All the social services that matter to us have been cut. Now, what are the two areas where the budget has been expanded? Actually, it's three areas. Number one, the IDF and defense. And you really can't argue with that. We have one huge war going on, Gaza. We have these smaller wars in Syria, in Iran. You can't argue with the fact that defense is being, that budget has grown. But 5 billion shekels, billion with a B, which is about $1.3 billion. 5 billion shekels has been allocated to the ultra Orthodox community, the Haredim, for their yeshiva studies, for their daycare programs, for their bonuses for having children, basically funding them to keep on being the parasites that they are, sucking off of Israeli society, but not giving back. Yet Yair Lapid, the opposition leader, described this budget as the Israeli government reaching into the pockets of the majority and stealing our money and giving it to the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredim. And that's exactly what it is. There is no other way to describe it. So think about this. We have some women, but mostly young men, who have served close to 300 days of military reserve duty since October 7th. 300 days. I personally know people who've served 200 days. Their businesses are collapsing, their families are falling apart, their marriages are suffering, their children have PTSD from their father being away from home. And now the military, these guys are being called up once again as Netanyahu has decided to expand the war in Gaza and continue the war in Gaza instead of bringing the hostages home. So we are sending these same guys back into Gaza. At the same time, the exemption of the ultra Orthodox from military service continues. And not only that, but the ultra Orthodox community is given 5 billion shekels to continue not working, not serving in the army, having as many kids as they damn well please. And so this is where Israelis are right now. And this is why John Polin is asking the prime minister, with all due respect, to please take off your yellow hostage pin. Because what's clear to all of us is that bringing the hostages home is not the priority of this government. Staying in power is the priority of this government. This 5 billion shekel allocation to the ultra Orthodox community, it's a bribe. It's a bribe to them to say, keep voting with me, Netanyahu, so that I can stay in power. So that's where Israelis are right now. We're feeling extremely stuck, extremely helpless. We're out in the streets protesting. It doesn't seem to make a difference, and it won't make a difference. I won't lie to you. It's not going to make a difference anymore because this government, by passing the budget, has now solidified its hold on power for the next year and a half. And I said there was one other area where spending has increased in this budget, and that other area is the coalition itself. The coalition has allocated millions of new spending packages that didn't exist before, new spending for coalition purposes, whether it's to study settlement building in the West Bank or other programs funding the ultra Orthodox. There's a new bureau set up to help fund yeshiva students from foreign countries who are considering studying in yeshiva in Israel. And really, this is just another way to give money to the yeshivas and to the ultra Orthodox. So they are literally robbing the pockets of the rest of us in order to fund their own government. This while there are still 59 hostages in Gaza. This while there are young men and some women going back to the reserves for 300 plus days of service in the past year. And again, this isn't just Joel going on a rant. This is Joel speaking about what close to 80%, you know what, let's call it 75. Let's call it 75% of Israelis feel this. Well, that still leaves 25% who doesn't feel this. Who's that 25%? Well, 13% are the ultra Orthodox. The Haredi population of Israel is 13%, and they are the fastest growing sector of the Israeli population. So let's call it the 75% who agree with me. Then you add on the 13% of the ultra Orthodox, the Haredim. That brings you up to what? 88%. So then you're left with 12%. And then that 12%, they're the ones who say, I'm not sure, I don't know, or they're the right wing extremists who support the Hilltop Youth and Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben Gvir. So they're a small minority of the Israeli population. But the problem with Israeli government is that policy is made by the kingmakers. Policy is made by the small political parties on the fringe who sell themselves off to whoever will pay the most. And right now, because Likud is the one who's able to assemble a coalition, and because Likud needs them, Netanyahu needs them, they're able to say, keep on exempting us from the army, keep on giving billions of shekels to yeshiva studies and to Haredi families who don't work, etc. So that little story of where John Polin is at by asking the coalition to remove their yellow pins, I think that represents the bigger story of where Israelis are right now. Just one side note, another article I read this week is that we don't have enough soldiers in Gaza. The platoon commanders, the officers in Gaza, are saying that they're having a hard time getting soldiers to show up for the reserves. As you remember, right after October 7th, we had I think it was a 200% rate of showing up for reserve service. The army called up 150,000 soldiers and 300,000 showed up. People were volunteering even though they hadn't been asked. Well, right now, it's well below, I think it's in the range of 80%, which means about 20% of reserve soldiers simply aren't showing up. They're saying, I can't, that if I do, I will literally get divorced, or mentally I'm unfit, or my business is struggling. I can't afford to leave my business or my family. Or they're saying, we're not going back to Gaza because we don't believe it's actually going to free the hostages. In the beginning, we thought that it would free the hostages, but right now, we think it's for political reasons that we're being sent back to Gaza. So we literally do not have enough soldiers. In general, we don't have enough soldiers, but more and more are simply not showing up for reserve duty, finding, I wouldn't say finding ways to get out of it, because it's not like they're being sneaky. They have the option of presenting a legitimate reason to not serve, and more are doing that. Meanwhile, the ultra-Orthodox are not serving at all. So it's a real problem we're facing in Israel. And when we hear phrases like civil war, it is possible that there could be some form of, I mean, there already is a civil war, although it's not the bayonets on a battlefield, Gettysburg type of civil war. It's a civil war of ideology and words. You hear people talking about how they hate the ultra-Orthodox, and the ultra-Orthodox using words like they hate the rest of us. This week, the ultra-Orthodox had a big rally where they were protesting against being drafted into the IDF, and they set some dumpsters on fire. And when firemen came out to put out the blaze, the ultra-Orthodox pushed the burning dumpsters onto the firemen. They injured firemen. They injured policemen. This is what the ultra-Orthodox are doing in Israel. All it takes is one person to go into Bnei Brak or Mea Shearim or some other ultra-Orthodox neighborhood and start smashing windows and setting cars on fire. And I would not be surprised if a lot of other people followed suit, or the other way around, if some ultra-Orthodox came into a secular area of Israel and began setting things ablaze or causing property destruction where others would follow suit. I do think we're on the brink of a civil war, and all it takes is the ignition of the match to light it. I never thought I would say that, but I really do think it's possible. Because there is so much animosity right now between these sectors of society. Wish I had better, more optimistic news for you this week, but if you want to know where Israelis are at, that is where. I do have one question that I'm going to read to you from a reader. I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't have it in front of me. It's from Eric, who is an avid listener and also a player of the Word Quest game. And Eric basically is asking, am I to assume correctly, or am I to assume, he's asking, that Israelis still support Trump despite the fact that Trump is unreliable? And we see what Trump is doing to Ukraine. Is there any fear among Israelis that Trump will turn on Israel? That's a great question. We are seeing that Trump is turning on Ukraine. There's also a new poll out that shows, I believe, that 1 in 3 American Jews worry that Trump is now going to turn on Israel the way he is on Ukraine. I actually am not worried, Eric. I do not think that Trump would turn on Israel. And I have one reason why. Actually, I have 100 million reasons why. The 100 million reasons why are the dollars of Miriam Adelson. Miriam Adelson, the widow of Sheldon Adelson, the casino magnate in Las Vegas, whose house I have performed in, by the way. Different story, different podcast episode. Miriam Adelson gave a gift of $100 million to Donald Trump as part of his presidential campaign. And as I've mentioned before on this podcast, that was not a free gift, spend it as you choose. I am certain that that gift was given with some major strings attached in terms of support for Israel. And I'm sure that Adelson is in touch with Trump somehow or other regularly. I don't think that Trump could afford, literally, monetarily, to turn his back on Israel. So, the guy is unstable and impossible to turn down, but I personally am not worried that he would turn his back on Israel the way he would on Ukraine. Now, that is not to say that his support is always going to be steadfast and at the same level as we're always used to, but I don't see the parallel that you might be asking about, Eric. Good question, though. That does it for this week's episode of Inside Israel. Again, please listen on Wednesday so that you can hear completely different content. Subscribe on joelchasnoff.com/podcast using the Apple and Spotify buttons. Next week's live broadcast will be at the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern. I'll be back in Israel by then, so that will be 8 p.m. for me. Israel is now on daylight savings time, so East Coast U.S. is now 6 hours behind Israel. Also, starting this Thursday, you can go on my website, joelchasnoff.com, and download a one-page Passover supplement. This is a one-pager that you can use at your Passover Seders. It has some thoughts on the 4 questions. I actually give you a 5th question that you might ask this year. It talks about a 5th child that we might consider incorporating into our discussion of the 4 children at the Seder. And of course, it has, sadly, the prayer for the hostages, which I encourage you all to say at your Seder, sadly, once again. That is not quite ready yet, but by Thursday, it will be. So on Thursday, go to joelchasnoff.com. And if you're signed up for my newsletter, which you'll get on Thursday, you'll have a link right there to download it as well. Until next Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern, thank you so much for joining. I'm Joel Chasnoff, signing off. The Heat Road, everyone.